President Trump took to Twitter earlier this week to issue a stern warning to Iran to think twice before potentially carrying out an attack on the United States or try to assassinate one of our country's leaders. In one of the two tweets, the president said multiple sources have told him Iran was planning some sort of nefarious deadly attack on the United States, allegedly as retaliation for the killing of the top Iranian general Qassem Soleimani.
But the president didn't stop there, saying that if Iran launched an attack in any form against the United States, the consequences for the Persian people would be, quote, 1,000 times greater. Joining us to discuss the mutual threats is author Professor Georgetown and Executive Vice President of the Quincy Institute for Responsible Statecraft, Trita Parsi. Great friend of the show. Great to see you, sir.
Good to see you, sir.
Thank you for having me.
All right, so what does this whole back and forth say about the state of our current relationship or lack thereof with Iran and where things may be heading?
Well, it's obviously extremely worrisome. I want to take a few steps back and talk a little bit about the assassination plot, because right there in that tweet that Trump put out, he said something that casts a lot of doubt about the story. I don't think we can completely reject it, but it is somewhat of a peculiar story. Trump does not reference intelligence reports about this alleged plot. Instead, he says news reports, press reports. I don't know if that means that he found out about this alleged plot by reading Politico, or whether there's another reason as to why he's just not saying our intelligence is saying this. And it adds to another peculiar thing with the story, which is that the South Africans came out with a statement after the Politico report came out and said that they found out about this alleged plot that same day, essentially indicating they found out about it through the press or through Twitter. So the question then rises, if there actually was genuine and high confidence intelligence that the Iranians were planning to assassinate the South African, the U.S. ambassador to South Africa, wouldn't the first step be to notify the South African intelligence to make sure that we got the proper protection for the ambassador? Why did that not happen? We're seeing a pattern that is very similar to what happened around the time of the assassination of General Soleimani, in which the administration claimed that there was intelligence that said that there was an imminent attack. And as a result, the U.S. had to act. And later on, we, of course, found out there was no such thing, because Trump was debating whether to assassinate Soleimani or not on the golf course together with Lindsey Graham. And then in the report that was presented to Congress, there was no reference at all to any intelligence indicating an imminent attack. We're seeing the same pattern here. A claim of some intelligence saying that the Iranians are planning to do this, and then a lot of conduct and behavior that indicates that we're not acting accordingly. We're acting in a way as if there was no such plot.
Yeah, very important to parse that. While we have you here, sir, I also wanted to get your reaction to this peace deal, which was signed the Abraham Accord signed yesterday in the White House. A lot of to-do here in Washington around the normalization of the Gulf Arab states and Israel. You have spoken with us about that very much in the past, about how it's kind of the consolidation of a deal, which was basically it was a secret alliance that has been around and known by experts for a long time. How should we think about what is happening right now?
There's a lot of hoopla around it as if this is something extremely historic. And obviously, the administration is going to tout this as if this is a major victory. And if there is more dialogue in the region per se, that's actually a very, very good thing. However, the thing that worries me tremendously about this is that it's become quite clear this is not a peace deal, because at the end of the day, the UAE and Bahrain were not at war with Israel. They've never been at war with Israel. This is an arms deal, in which, in order for the UAE to be able to buy F-35s from the United States, it had to give this concession and normalize relations with Israel. I mean, the Israelis are openly talking about it as such. If the UAE buys F-35s, what is that for? Well, we know that many of the GCC states buy a tremendous amount of American weaponry. They're not buying it because they're particularly capable of using it, or that they actually would have much of a chance of being able to use it effectively. They're buying it as a security guarantee. By buying a lot of American weapons, their calculation is that the United States will be obligated to come to the UAE's defense in the same manner that the United States feels now obligated to be helping Saudi Arabia in the war of Yemen. So instead of this actually creating peace, this seems to be something that is doing one more thing to bind the United States to the security of some of these states who themselves act quite recklessly, which then forces the U.S. to stay in the Middle East much longer instead of doing what the president actually has promised his public that he would do, his supporters that he would do, which is to bring the American troops home.
Got it.
And finally, Dr. Parsi, just lay out for us your expectations of what the dynamics would look like with Iran under a Biden administration versus how they would unfold under a potential Trump re-election.
Well, it very much depends on what the Biden administration does. If there is a very quick and decisive move to try to restore the JCPOA, meaning that the United States would either walk back into it or align with it, meaning that it would comply with it, even though it would not necessarily become a party to it, then I think there is a small window of opportunity to be able to reduce the tensions and be able to avoid a lot of this unfortunate stuff that we're seeing right now. We have to keep in mind, if that assassination story is true, and incidentally, the Iranians have engaged in such assassinations in the past, so it's not entirely unlikely. But if it is true, we have to ask ourselves, why is this happening all of a sudden at this point? Mindful of the fact that we had an era in which we saw a significant reduction of tensions. Why are tensions going back up again? And I think the answer lies very much in that the Trump administration walked out of the deal and began this economic warfare policy that they call maximum pressure. If we undo that, there is a small chance that things can move in the right direction. The challenge, though, is that the Iranians are having their elections in May of next year. And it's very, very likely that they will elect a hardline president. So going from a scenario in which a lot of the tensions, unfortunately, have been originating over here in Washington, we may move to a scenario in which the Iranians will end up becoming highly problematic in their conduct with the United States and the driver of this. But that small window, those 3 months, may offer a time frame to be able to set the relationship straight again, or at least in the right direction, on the right trajectory, which we have not been on for the last couple of years now.
Very interesting.
Dr. Parsi, always great to have you break these things down for us. Thank you so much.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you for having me.
Next on Rising, why did Sonny Hostin and Meghan McCain spar over a potential theoretical Joe Rogan moderated debate? We're going to hear about that when Rising returns.